Hey, yo, salute to all my subscribers and a special shout out to everybody else passing through. YouTube, what's good? All right, so in part one, I was talking about how arguing and fighting, the role that they play in relationships, and why people have, or the fact that people have generally a misconception about what arguing is versus what fighting is, and why people usually will wrongly assess or wrongly perceive arguing to be unhealthy in a relationship because they usually are associating it with fighting. So, in this part, here, the second part, we're going to talk a little bit about what fighting is versus what arguing is. And then in the next part, we'll see if we can't tie the two together and figure out, you know, what the difference, exactly what the difference is pertaining to relationships and how we can kind of fix this thing and figure out how to make our relationships not just bearable but a little more enjoyable. So fighting, usually, I'll get into a whole kind of dictionary definition thing. I'm just going to paraphrase through this one, but if you were to look up the term arguing, you would see something like, there's usually an adjective form, a noun form, and a verb form for most definitions, not all. But arguing, you would typically see something like, um, to cite um, a point of view, usually providing evidence of some kind to support what your point of view or your view or views are on a certain subject, and usually for the purpose of trying to persuade another person. Usually, you're using reasoning, evidence of something, examples, but usually the um, the main words to remember that you're going to see is using reasoning and citing evidence as to why, your views are what they are. And usually you're trying to use that reasoning or use, that evidence that you're providing as examples. You're using those things specifically to try and persuade um, another person to see things or do things your way, or even to not do something that you feel like they shouldn't be doing. It's typically arguing, which you're going to see for the definition. And then if you look up fighting, typically there's a physical aspect there. Fight When you look up the word fighting, typically you're going to see some kind of a physical altercation. They might have an example of a war or a battle, but typically it's a altercation or conflict that is physical. Now, when you look up fighting and when you look up arguing, you're going to see one thing in each of those definitions that is a little bit misleading. In the definition for arguing, you're going to see somewhere in that definition, um, it's going to make a correlation between, it might say something like, typically in a heated or an angry way. That's what you're going to see if you look up the definition for arguing, along with those other parts that I mentioned. And then if you look up fighting, after it talks about all the physical aspects, it's going to say something like, to quarrel or to argue. So the dictionary does draw a correlation. And I think what happens is, I think people do what people mostly do, is they'll pick a soundbite, or they'll pick a line out of a sentence, or they'll pick a paragraph out of a chapter, or they'll pick a chapter out of a page. I mean, they'll pick, y'all know where I'm going. They'll pick a small part of a larger something, and then they'll harp on that, and they'll make that the overall idea of what it is that they're dealing with. And I think that's the problem. I think, the segue, you can, arguing can be a catalyst to fighting, but the two to me aren't initially synonymous, because more aspects of arguing have to do with more of like a debate style discussion where, again, someone is stating what their views are, what their opinions are, what their thoughts are, and they're in that moment or in that situation trying to convince another person, right? That's not inherently bad. I don't see how that makes a relationship unhealthy. Like I mentioned, like I segued to in the first part of this mini series, if you never have an argument with the person that you're with. Matter of fact, in my opinion, if you don't do it consistently, then you're not communicating in an honest way. You can argue, you can make the argument that arguing is bad or can be bad. And then I can make the argument that maybe it is, but it's human, it's realistic. See, the reason why I say a relationship is not healthy without consistent arguing is because I'm a realist. It's because I'm a literalist. And I know that human nature is that we all have views, opinions, thoughts, belief systems, a moral compass, whatever you want to call it, but a way that we see ourselves, and a way that we approach life, and a way that we will live our lives. And although, as a whole, people are typically the same because we're just looking for happiness, we're looking to, make sense of life and take care of our family, the people we care about. That's where we are the same. But those different points break down into very individual, very unique ways from person to person, and interests and likes and dislikes, and spiritual or religious beliefs and political views. All these things make up who we are individually, and that's what separates us. So why I say it's healthy to consistently have arguments in your relationship is because those things are already there. The thing that keeps some people from arguing versus other people is not that those views aren't different, because you know how hard it would be to sift through 7+ billion people on this planet, and then you're gonna truncate that down to the people that you have direct access to, not social media, people that you're actually going to have direct access to, that you're going to be in a relationship with. And it's usually people within a certain mile radius from where you live, work, go to school, or hang out, right? You're going to have different views. So it's either you're going to ignore those views, or you're going to openly celebrate those views, but then you have to have discussions with people that you might be interested or attracted to and pursuing a relationship with. You have to have discussions because you have to know if their views align with yours. And for some people, that's enough. If they see that a person that they're interested in dating or interested in pursuing a relationship with longer term, if they see that those interests and those views don't align, some people are smart enough to say, all right, this may not work because these are major views that I have. Your major views are different. Maybe, for example, like having children, you want them, I don't. Then we need to go our separate ways. But the majority of people, for whatever reason, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's just a fear of being alone. I don't know if it's just because people just innately think if they can convince a person to care enough for them, then in the long term, they may be able to persuade those people to do, what they want them to do. In short, I'm saying that people seem to think that they can change people, and you can't change anyone. But that's how most people approach relationships. So people will ignore the signs. People will not have those discussions. They will not see what a person's interests are or what their long-term views or goals are, for family, kids, marriage, religion, whatever, political views, things that actually divide and separate friends, family, what have you. People will avoid these important things and think that just based on emotion, just based on love, that they'll be able to make their relationship work. And that is not the case. I mean, you can even be, you can even have different careers that conflict, with each other. If a person just doesn't understand the career choice, or if that career choice causes you to be away from home for long periods of time, there are so many different things that can cause a relationship not to work, that it's the cynical nature and who we are as human beings that makes those situations worse. Because rather than us put in the effort and the time and the energy to be creative to find the few ways that could make a relationship work, we rather focus on the many ways why they won't. And so a lot of times we psych ourselves out into thinking things that aren't true, i.e., is arguing good or bad? Is it fighting? Is it not fighting? Does it lead to fighting? Does it always lead to fighting? Does it have to lead to fighting? No, it doesn't. It doesn't necessarily. I think first we need to stop using words that are literal as figures of speech in our everyday language. That's one. And then two, we need to actually know the definitions of words and how those words are used in a sentence first, and then how they apply to different situations. Because there are many words that have different meanings depending on how and when they're used. And because we're people with different emotions, and because we like to misconstrue certain words and make certain words mean certain things based on the inflection that they're said with, if they're coming from a certain person, or is it in a joking way, is it in an angry way, is it in a serious way, is it in a kind of a sensitive soft-spoken way. These things, and we all are guilty of it, but we have to get out of this way, and that's what this channel is here for, to expose these different things. You can call someone an asshole in so many different ways, using so many different voice inflections, that 5 out of 10 people won't even realize that you're insulting them. I've learned, and we all know, especially with social media, the way that it is, you can say a word to someone that is offensive, but if it's said in a certain way, they associate different meaning to it. And that's fine. I'm not saying that, because that's part of language, is part of communication, communication is 85% nonverbal. But that other 15% that's often forgotten about is very important. If we spend too much time taking words like arguing or fighting, if we spend too much time on the ancillary things or the peripheral things that are going on around those words, like tone, facial expression, voice inflection, whether it's accompanied with a laugh, or it's accompanied with like a scolding face or what have you. If we pay attention to too much of that 85% and not enough of the 15%, which actually is the word itself or the words that we choose to use, then we can take all meaning away from those words. And once you start to strip all meaning away from words, we kind of get to a dangerous place, because although we have these different ways to communicate and understand each other, we do also have to understand that the foundation, before you can get to, well, what's the voice, what's the tone, before you can get to, is the inflection high enough, before you can get to, is it a question or a statement, before you can get to, are we talking in the sense of a noun, verb, or adjective, before you can get to all that is the word itself. And on the surface, when people talk about arguing, talk about fighting, they're already using the words in incorrect ways. And I think the very next time that you have an argument, disagreement, a discussion with your partner, your significant other, pay attention to where that segue is, or what that catalyst is, to when that two people simply having a different view, where that transforms into a heated argument or a fight or something that you perceive to be negative. Pinpoint where that is, because I think a lot of times you'll find, and I'm gonna wrap it up, a lot of times you'll find it's not the views that are differing, and it's not even always the way that those views are laid out, are verbalized or articulated. A lot of times it's the conditioning based on past experiences that we all have, that we've had, that might not have been so favorable, that automatically once we hear that a person has a different view, our defenses are automatically up. And once your defenses go up in a conversation that you should be having with a partner, potential significant other, or someone that you're looking to spend time or potentially the rest of your life with, those are defenses we have to work on, because once those defenses go up, you start to miss very important things, very important signs, important viewpoints that you might see a different way if those defenses weren't up. That's all I'm saying. I'm saying for now, for where we are right now in this mini-series, do not write off arguing as being an unhealthy aspect of a relationship, because that if you're arguing with someone, and I know you've all heard this before, once you stop giving a fuck, once you stop caring, There is no words being exchanged. There's no, in order to argue with someone, some people would say, I have to care about what you think in order to argue with you. And that is a component. It needs to be there. In order for lines of communication to be kept open, there has to be some kind of a thought of you caring about what that other person thinks in some way, shape, or form. Whether you're trying to convince them to see your point of view, or you're just trying to offer up your point of view so that they know more about you and what they're dealing with. But there has to be some kind of care or emotion there in order for that, line of communication to still be open. And then later on, we can start to address, you know, maybe better ways of getting that thought or that opinion out to that other person so that they don't perceive it as, a fight or something that they need to be defensive of. Me personally, I don't give a fuck. I'm a straightforward, blunt person. I'm gonna say what I gotta say. I'm gonna put it out there the way that I feel it needs to be put out there. And then if how a person chooses to take it, that's how they choose to take it. But I do that in full disclosure. I do that knowing that that's gonna rub some people the wrong way, and I give people that option, and I give people that full disclosure in the beginning, so that they can choose to deal with that or not deal with it. Because I think that's the biggest thing missing here in relationships these days, especially with my generation and the generation right behind mine, is not necessarily just that you communicate or just that you articulate what it is you're feeling or thinking at any given point in time from one moment to the next. I think it's that people don't have those necessary discussions in the beginning that sets the tone for how things are going to be perceived later. And I think that's a big part of it. And I think we'll touch on that in part 3 of this mini series. I don't pretend to know everything. I just know what I know. Let me know what y'all think about this one. And I'll see you on the next one. Arguing or fighting? Is it unhealthy? Is it necessary? I think so. I think it's not. I think it is healthy. I think it is necessary. Let me know what y'all think. Peace and love.